The Story of the First Easter. Copyright 1994, Bluewood Books. Jesus had been staying in Bethany, where his friends Martha, Mary, and Lazarus lived. But he knew that the time came for him to go to Jerusalem. The people in Jerusalem wanted him to be their king, but Jesus knew that his Father in heaven had something even more important for him to do. As Jesus approached Jerusalem, many people went out to meet him, waving palm branches. The people knew who he was, and they were very excited to see him. "Hosanna, the Son of David," they shouted. "Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord." Several days later was Passover. This was the celebration of the holy day when God delivered the children of Israel from the Egyptians. Jesus and his 12 disciples got together at a friend's house in Jerusalem for a special Passover supper. As they were eating, Jesus took some bread. He blessed it and broke it. He passed it to his disciples, and he said, "Take this and eat it. This is my body." Then he took a cup. He gave thanks and said, "All of you drink from it. This is my blood of the covenant, poured out for the forgiveness of sins." Everybody was happy that they could be together for this special supper, but Jesus seemed sad. He looked around the table at his disciples and said, "One of you will turn me over to our enemies." 11 of his disciples couldn't believe their ears, but Judas knew what Jesus was talking about. After supper, Jesus took his disciples to the Mount of Olives. Then Peter, James, and John went with Jesus to a grove of olive trees called the Garden of Gethsemane. Jesus often went to this place with his disciples to pray and rest. Jesus went among the trees and knelt down to pray. He asked God the Father to help him face what he knew was going to happen soon. When Jesus came back to the 3 disciples, he found them sleeping and asked them to pray with him. But they fell asleep again. He went and prayed 2 more times. When the disciples awoke, they heard the noise of a crowd and saw the flashing of torches. The crowd was armed with swords, clubs, and spears. Judas rushed out from the crowd and greeted Jesus with a kiss, as though he was glad to see him. The crowd knew Judas would kiss Jesus to betray him. They grabbed Jesus and arrested him. One of the disciples near Jesus drew his sword and cut off the ear of the slave of a high priest. But Jesus said, "No more of this," and healed the slave's ear. When Jesus' disciples saw that he could not allow them to fight, they ran away. The crowd took Jesus to Caiaphas, the high priest. After a mock trial before Caiaphas, the crowd took Jesus to the Roman governor, Pontius Pilate, who ruled over Judah. He listened to their complaints about Jesus and offered either to set a criminal named Barabbas free or to set Jesus free. The crowd wanted Barabbas free. Instead of telling them to let Jesus go, Pilate washed his hands, let Barabbas go, and let them have Jesus. The crowd cried, "Crucify him!" So the Roman soldiers took Jesus out of the city to the place called Calvary, or Golgotha, which means the place of the skull. They made a huge cross to crucify Jesus on. A great crowd of people followed Jesus and the soldiers. Some were enemies of Jesus, glad to see him suffer. They did many wicked and painful things to hurt Jesus. Others were friends of Jesus. Some women followed him and cried. Jesus turned to them and said, "Do not cry for me." The soldiers tried to make Jesus carry his own cross, but soon found he was too weak from his suffering and he could not carry it. They chose a man named Simon, who was passing by, and they made him carry the cross to its place at Calvary. When they came to Calvary, the soldiers laid the cross down and stretched Jesus out on it. They drove nails through his hands and his feet to fasten him to the cross. When they stood the cross upright, Jesus was upon it. While the soldiers were doing this dreadful work, Jesus prayed to God for them. He prayed, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." 2 men who had been robbers had been sentenced to die. They were led out to be crucified at the same time with Jesus. One was placed on a cross on his right side, and the other on his left. Pilate ordered a sign hung over Jesus, which read, "This is Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews." The people in the crowd looked at Jesus on the cross and mocked him. The priest and scribe said, "He saved others, but he can't even save himself. If you can come down from that cross, we will believe you." Even one of the robbers mocked Jesus, but the second robber scolded him. "Don't you fear God?" he asked. "You are going to die the same way. We deserve to die, but this man has done nothing wrong." Then this man said to Jesus, "Lord, remember me when you come into your kingdom." Jesus answered him, "Today you will be with me in heaven." Jesus saw his mother Mary and his friend Mary Magdalene standing near the cross. They were filled with sorrow for him. Also standing nearby was his disciple John. Jesus asked John to take care of his mother. Then a sudden darkness came over the land. Jesus cried out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" "It is finished. Father, into your hands I give my spirit." At that moment, there was a loud clap of thunder. The earth shook like an earthquake. The Roman officer who had charge of the soldiers around the cross saw what had taken place and how Jesus had died. He was afraid and said, "Surely this was the Son of God." That evening, Joseph, a wealthy man who believed in Jesus, went to Pontius Pilate and asked Pilate for permission to bury the body of Jesus. Joseph then took his body down from the cross and wrapped it in fine linen. Nicodemus, the other man who believed in Jesus, brought precious spices, which they wrapped Jesus' body. When they placed the body in the tomb, which is a cave dug out of a rock, they covered the opening of the tomb with a large stone. The following morning, some of the people who had helped crucify Jesus came to Pilate. They reminded him that Jesus said, "After 3 days, I will rise again." Pilate gave orders that the tomb be watched for 3 days to make sure that no one tried to take the body. Early on the first day of the week, there was a great earthquake. An angel of the Lord came from heaven, rolled back the stone, and sat on it. Mary Magdalene and some of the others came to the tomb, found the stone had rolled away, and saw the angel. The angel told them not to be afraid. "And Jesus is not here," he said. "He has risen." Afterward, Jesus appeared to his disciples and stayed with them for 40 days. He was then taken up into heaven. Today, when we celebrate Easter, we remember the day that Jesus